just that the program board are suggesting on for the students to dress up and come out to the highlight at like the outside the residential area. And so it's very interesting to see how people are dressing up, wearing masks, and kind of like partying outside the residential area. However, as 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 much as strict we are in terms of the university policy, it is still kind of a little bit difficult to control the parties and also the whatever gathering is happening on campus. At NYUAD, we have the policy to have a gathering up to 6 people only, but who it is to control, right? Like it is still very difficult for students to control, for the public safety to control, and also for the university to control. However, we are still following the policy of the UAE to have tested every day. I think it's still very difficult to tell if whether or not the cases are rising because of the Halloween weekend. However, there has been cases that are lower down in the UAE for the past month. So it's still very difficult to say. How about you, Emily? How's it like in Fordham?
So Fordham has been so far so good on the cases, but definitely this weekend there was some partying. Fordham sent us an email about it, like right before Halloween weekend, warning everybody to stay safe and social distance and follow all of the protocols in terms of getting together off campus, because most of the cases that Fordham has had have been off-campus students. So slightly concerning. Mostly everything that happened this weekend was like apartment parties. So on the smaller side, but the small gatherings of people indoors, not following social distancing or wearing masks, could definitely lead to an outbreak. So we're gonna have to cross our fingers and pay attention to the COVID rates in this coming week, because we really can't tell what effect Halloween has had. Other than that, we've had a lot of programming too. The costumes this year have actually been pretty good. I don't know about you guys, but everyone has been like really creative. I think COVID has brought out everybody's creative side because we've had more time to think about costumes and just like sit and brainstorm. It was a kind of low-key weekend, but one that could definitely have pretty big effects in terms of COVID rates going forward. So we'll have to see. How's it been at BU?
Yeah, so BU was definitely also taking a lot of precautions to make sure that people were being safe this weekend. There was a big concern, obviously, like Fordham, with having off-campus parties and large gatherings. So they sent out an email, which actually, this was following Halloween weekend, but this was just reframing the rules that BU had prior to Halloween weekend. Because due to the cases rising across the United States, BU has been really concerned about making sure that off-campus as well as people on campus are still abiding by the rules. So they changed the policy for the restrictions on gatherings to no more than 10 people. In the past, it was no more than 20 people. So this is like both for on-campus and off-campus. And if any of these rules are broken, it results in an immediate suspension and possibly expulsion from the university. So that just goes to show how strictly they're taking all of these precautions, and they also are making sure that those, symptom checkers that people are supposed to fill out every day, if you don't fill those out for over 48 hours, you will not be able to swipe into your building. They'll turn off your access to the building. So they're really making sure that people are still like getting tested. And that also goes for being tested. So they're making sure that everyone is still getting tested every 48 to 72 hours and filling out those symptom checkers, because people, as time has gone on, have kind of gotten that fatigue and have gotten like a little lazy with filling out those forms and making sure that they're abiding by those rules. So this was just an email to make sure that people are still following those rules. there hasn't been necessarily like a reflection, obviously, just yet of what's taken place this weekend. BU is making sure that there were a lot of like opportunities outside of being just like going out and hanging out with friends, which I didn't hear too much about. So I think that's a good sign. But they also offered like virtual activities. Like I know BU has a student-run organization called If It Won't Cut It, and they hosted a virtual like gathering with the comedian Hassan Minaj, who has over 1 million followers on Instagram. So a lot of people tuned into that, and it was just like a Q&A with him. And I believe they also may have screened some movies, but it was just an opportunity to like get people to want to stay in on Halloween night. So they've definitely taken it into their own hands during that time to make sure that everyone's like being responsible. A lot of people were still like dressing up and everything, but a lot of it was just like to take photos. Most people I know were just dressing up in their apartment with their friends and just like having it like, you know, just fun within like their apartment and maybe one or two other friends. But at least from what I've seen, people played it safe. I'm sure since we're such a large university, there unfortunately had to be people that, you know, maybe went past a little bit of what we're supposed to do. But obviously those cases will be reflected in the future. But more importantly, we have, I'm sure, as everyone knows, an election coming up tomorrow. And that's going to be a real topic of conversation, as it has been for the past few weeks and months on campus. And it's all anyone's talking about right now on BU. I'm not really sure what's going on, you know, with you across the world, but I know it's a big topic of conversation and how we're gonna cover it.
I mean, it's definitely been very stressful and spurring some interesting conversations here too. Most of the stuff that we're concerned about mainly is mail-in ballot voting and getting our votes counted, because as college students, most of us are away from home and we can't vote in person. So I know all of my roommates and I requested mail-in ballots as early as we could, and had them mailed to our houses, and then mailed to the schools, and we had to fill them out and put them back in the mail. So it was like almost 3 steps to get them counted in time. And with all this uncertainty about, like what's the deadline for when they'll be counted and when they're received. So there's definitely been a lot of stress about voting and, having our voices heard, at least at Fordham.
Yeah. So it's been really interesting to see like exactly what's been going on like across the world. It's so easy to get caught up, especially on like what's happening here in the United States, and of course, since this is our election, it's so easy to like forget that it's something that really impacts the whole world. So that's really interesting to hear that like it's something that people across the world are really concerned about, and it's honestly, it makes it, a much more concerning, in a lot of ways, like a concerning event. And it makes it a little bit more nerve-wracking that it could be a few days before we end up finding the results and, what that means for everyone. So that's definitely quite interesting. But I know that we were talking about how some schools are having classes offered and some some universities aren't. Our university personally, we're having classes, but I know that other universities such as like Harvard and Brown have canceled classes for the day. So do you guys have classes tomorrow, like in New York? I don't really know like what exactly.
Yeah, Fordham gave us the day off, so hopefully that means that a lot of people will have the chance to go vote if they didn't do mail-in or absentee ballot voting. That's so interesting, though, that you guys don't have the day off. I mean, it's definitely something that would probably be helpful in terms of voter turnout. But hopefully the increased amount of requests for mail-in and absentee ballot voting this year means that people are finding ways around it.
Right. Like what we've been doing, at least on our campus, like there's a lot of talks about how a lot of people have already voted. So a lot of people have already turned in their ballots either through mail or by going to a drop box. I, for one, went to my local drop box and turned mine in about 2 weeks ago. So I think that's kind of the consensus. But there are a lot of people that were out of state, and for various reasons, they weren't able to vote in like for their state being away, so they had to actually register to vote in the state of Massachusetts. So that was definitely some added stress. So I actually do know a lot of people that are still going to be voting tomorrow in person. BU has an on-campus polling site, so it's a few blocks off like our regular campus, but it is a Boston University campus building, so it's going to be set up just like a normal polling place. I believe that it's just reserved for Boston University students and staff, but I think that there will be a large turnout for people that register to vote tomorrow, especially with a lot of students that live out of state for registering that weren't able to in their own state. So I do know a few people personally that will be still voting tomorrow, and they will be voting on campus. Yeah, I didn't know that that was actually a process that could still be done and people can still vote internationally. So that's good to know that there's still people that, although they live across the world, they're still being active and still casting their ballots.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And just, I guess I'll end with a reminder to everyone watching to get out and vote. This election is super important, and everybody has an important voice. Even just one vote can make a difference.
Right. And tomorrow we will be doing extensive coverage on HAPS about elections. We'll be having lots of journalists from across the country and maybe even across the world tuning in to give their updates on what it's looking like for different polling places and what the atmosphere is like. So if you're interested in tuning in, we will be featuring that on HAPS tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be going live probably from a voting station that's right outside Fordham. That there have been lines there for the last few days, so hopefully the turnout there is good tomorrow too.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what records have been broken after tomorrow, because I've heard that a lot of places have already seen more voters like before even the actual election day itself than people that voted in the entirety of the 2016 election in those states. I know Florida is one of those states, so hopefully that continues. Hopefully we break lots of records, want to see lots of participation. Yes. I'm Lorna.
Thank you guys for joining us.
We'll be back next week.